We still had our 6 frozen embryos left. And that is where this whole story begins. Hello everyone, it's Amanda with Eat, Pray, Crunch. I am here to talk about something that we have been holding close to our hearts for a very long time now and have known about for quite a while now. It is something that we have discussed or mentioned briefly in other videos in the past in relation to the fertility struggle that we had before we had our first child. So let's rewind in Amanda and Bill's life back to, let's see, what year was it now? I'm starting to lose track of time. I think this was eight years ago now? Alex is 7 now. So this was early 2012. So yes, that was 8 years ago. I can't believe it's been almost a decade. That's insane. I'm not gonna tell the full extent of our infertility journey that we were on. If you want to hear that journey, I actually told that whole story several years ago when I was very early on in YouTube, like 6 years ago when I first started doing YouTube. I told that story. I have a whole playlist on our fertility journey. I will link it here in the cards as well as in the description box below if you want to have a much more in-depth history of our fertility struggles and how we ended up with the children that we have now. We have 3 children currently who are 2.5, 5, and 7 now at this point. They're getting big. But for those of you who want the Cliff Notes version, I will just tell you our story in a nutshell. So we had basically tried for 6 months to get pregnant and were unsuccessful, and we decided to just be proactive about it at the time and just, you know, have everything checked with us just to rule out any problems, or if it was just a, you know, wait and see and nothing's wrong but keep trying kind of thing. And we were really glad that we did that because we ended up finding out that we had a very severe male factor issue going on. Like I said, if you want to know all of those nitty-gritty little details, you can see it in our fertility journey playlist. But the fertility doctor we were seeing at the time had told us basically that with the numbers that we were seeing, that we had about a 1% chance of conceiving naturally, and that really even doing IUI was not looking like it would be a very likely success for us. And so she was really pushing us to go straight to do IVF. Now, granted, we had only been trying for 6 months at that time. And so we're like, all right, let's change it up, change our diet, try acupuncture, Chinese herbs, all the natural things, vitamins, supplements, you name it, we did all the things. We went back after several months and it had slightly improved. I always like to say it went from god awful to bad, but it still wasn't even good enough to the point where they thought that IUI would be successful. And they were still saying, yeah, at this point you probably still want to do IVF. So at that point we're like, okay, well, let's start saving our nickels and dimes because this is not going to be cheap. So that's what we did. So we just continued doing the like natural treatments we were doing, like herbs, supplements, acupuncture, all of the things that we were doing up to that point. We ended up deciding that we were going to go ahead and do IVF because we really were in a place where we were ready to have children, and with the odds that they were telling us, we felt like it would have just been, you know, a waste of time and frustration and things like that to just continue on trying ourselves, knowing how much the odds were stacked against us. So fast forward to when we actually did our IVF. And this was, I'm probably gonna get my dates a little off now, but I believe it was January or February, somewhere in there, when we went in to do our IVF. I won't go into all of the details about our IVF experience, since that's also in our fertility playlist, our infertility playlist. But it was definitely an involved physical process for those of you who have been through IVF before. It's very hard on your body, and it was especially hard on my body considering I was 28 at the time, and they had given me too much of certain hormone stimulating drugs, and it caused me to go into ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which was very painful and uncomfortable and a semi-serious situation. So that was fun. But anyway, while I was still experiencing this hyperstimulation syndrome, they proceeded with an embryo transfer. So we went ahead and we did the egg retrieval, and they ended up doing ICSI, where they actually suck up what appeared to be the healthiest looking sperm and literally injecting the one sperm with this like hair thin needle into the egg. It really is amazing, this medical technology that we have. It really is amazing. But they believed that that was our best bet considering how severe of a problem we had. So that's what we did, and I honestly can't remember the exact numbers, but I believe we ended up with 20 something odd eggs, and of those a certain number fertilized, and then they have to gestate per se for 5 days. They do 5 days where they have them in the lab and they watch them as they grow. I believe that 8 survived the 5 days, and they transferred 2. Mind you, when they did a fresh transfer, meaning they had not been frozen and then thawed and transferred, it was like fresh, like on that 5th day I went in and they did the transfer. Now granted, when I had my transfer done, my body was still experiencing the effects of this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And so in 2020 hindsight, that probably tells us a lot about why things happened the way they did. But yeah, so we had our transfer, we had to do the dreaded 2-week wait, and it turned out the doctor called. I had gone in for my blood test. The doctor called and said, "I'm so sorry. We were so hopeful. You're so young. Everything was such high quality. Everything looks so good." But now in 2020 hindsight, we're like, well, it was probably the fact that my body was still freaking out because it had this hyperstimulation syndrome, and then they like stick an embryo in there and my body's like, what the? My body was not feeling like it was in a place that was welcoming and ready to receive an embryo, basically, I think is why it probably failed. So at the time, that was hugely traumatic for us, devastating. We were devastated. I also tell that whole story in the infertility series, so be sure to go check that out. Long story short, 2 months later, there's a whole story that goes with that as well, but for the sake of time, I won't tell it now. We basically got pregnant naturally, shockingly, miraculously. Very much a God thing. I mean, because there's really no other way to explain it than it was a miracle. At least given the odds that they had told us and how unlikely it was that that would happen, yet 2 months after our failed IVF, we were pregnant naturally. It was one of the most incredible moments of our life, taking that pregnancy test and seeing a positive for the first time ever. Yeah, so that was our son, Alex, and he's now 7 years old. So yeah, after Alex, we thought, man, that was like, we were lucky. We were lucky, and that might not happen again. And we're really glad that we still had our 6 frozen embryos left. And that is where this whole story begins. So we thought that it was pretty likely that we were going to have to use those embryos, and that we had just gotten a lightning strike, that it was like so unlikely, but that we had just gotten unbelievably lucky, or just the hand of God. So we were really thinking we were going to be using the rest of the embryos, and we were so thankful we had them. But that wasn't going to stop us from trying naturally. We wanted to have at least 2 kids. At the time I said 2 to 4, We now have 3 and we are done and happy. But yeah, so we knew we wanted to have another. And so when our son was 9 months old, we started trying again because we're like, if this is going to be as long and involved of a process as it was the first time, we might as well give ourselves some cushion here to allow for that so that there isn't like a huge ginormous age gap between our kids. And we figured like if by some crazy random chance we got it on the first try, 9 months, for like they would be 18 months apart, and that was like the very, very minimum that we were comfortable with. So yeah, so we started trying again when he was 9 months old. First time we got pregnant. We were shocked. And at that point, me and Bill were like, maybe we should have him tested again, because like, what the heck? We got pregnant naturally with Alex, and here, very first try, we got it. Like, what? So we went and we had him tested again. And granted, at this point, the only major thing that we had really changed was to a much healthier diet. Not that it was like super unhealthy before, but we refined it quite a bit, adding a lot more vegetables and healthy fats and whole grains and, you know, all of those things. So that was the biggest change. And so we went to have him tested. Lo and behold, he was within the normal range, which was like shocking. It was shocking to us. Like, after everything that they had told us, you have a 1% chance of getting pregnant. And then, I mean, it was still at the like lower end of normal, but within normal limits. And we're like, what happened? So we still, to this day, we'll never know for sure, but we think that, you know, we'd done all of the acupuncture, Chinese herbs, supplements. We had changed our diet significantly, and God, who knows what combination of those things made the change, but that is what happened. So we got pregnant on the first try. Unfortunately, that pregnancy ended in miscarriage at about a little shy of 6 weeks. And we gave it about a month or two, and then we tried again. And unfortunately, that was a chemical pregnancy. And then at that point, we actually moved into the house we're in now. You know, we kind of took a little break again. And then once we're in the house, we're like, okay, we're moved. We're in our forever home. So we decided to try again. And once again, it was like first or second try and we were pregnant again. I was like, oh my word, this is crazy. So that means that we had three pregnancies within a span of a couple of months, 2 of which were miscarriages, sadly. But yeah, third time's a charm. That was our daughter, Sophie, who is now 5. And then after that, we were not 100% sure if we wanted to have one more child or not, if we were done with 2. I was not vlogging when I was pregnant with Alex, but I actually started this channel to document my pregnancy with Sophie. So that was in 2014. And I have her whole pregnancy documented after a lot of prayer, and we felt like we had some signs that like, yes, we are meant to have one more child. So once again, tried one more time, very first try again. So here we had gone from, at the very beginning of our fertility journey, being told it's pretty unlikely that you will ever get pregnant naturally on your own, to conceiving 3 children fairly easily. Like, I feel like I still don't even know what to think about our story. It's just like so crazy and miraculous, and we do not take our children for granted. I still think about how grateful I am that they are here and they are in our lives. You know, God really had a place for them in our family. And this whole situation, like many difficult situations in life, really are just like constant reminders of how little control we actually have in our lives, and how much we really do have to rely on God. because we ultimately don't have as much control as us humans like to think we do. And we will forever have circumstances in our lives that will remind us of that. So that was definitely a hugely refining thing for me and Bill, I think, in just surrendering control. And at least in our fertility journey, it really felt like it was a situation of just kind of going along for the ride. So then we had our third child, Teo, which I also have his whole pregnancy playlist, which I will put in the cards here. And then after he was born, it was very much, I had this very overwhelming, strong sense of peace that our family is complete. I had wanted to have 2 to 4 kids. We had 3. Our son Alex is twice exceptional and has level 1 autism. And we also part-time homeschool. Our hands are very full, as are our hearts. And we just felt like we know our limits and we really want to give the children that we have the best of us and the best of our resources. And we really felt like 3 was the number for us. Any more than that, we felt like it would be really stretching us too far in a lot of ways. So we always feel like we can tell that God is speaking to us when we feel an overwhelming sense of peace. And we very much felt an overwhelming sense of peace that our family was complete. But as you are probably thinking about, we had 6 frozen embryos left over. So that is the end of part 1 of this little series. I just wanted to give the little background of how we got to the point that we are at now. So that is the synopsis of our infertility journey and how we got to having 6 frozen embryos that we then had to decide what to do with. So stay tuned for part 2, where I will talk about the whole emotional, intellectual, spiritual process we went through in deciding what we wanted to do with our embryos. So stay tuned for that, and be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.